Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my explainer series on all of the paperwork you need to be familiar with if you are purchasing a home in the state of North Carolina. My name is Emily McAllister. I'm a realtor in Greenville, North Carolina with the Real Brokerage, and today we're going to talk about the buyer agency agreement. This is probably one of the most important pieces of paperwork you're going to sign short of the contract to purchase a home itself that you want to be really confident that you understand completely, being that this is the documentation that hires an agent to work on your behalf. This paperwork is also brand new. Last week I mentioned that the touring agreement was just adopted in October of 2024. This buyer agency agreement, the concept of it has been implemented in the state of North Carolina for more than the last decade. It's always existed, but this version of the paperwork was just drafted in October of this year. So it is also brand new. Previously, the buyer agency agreements were 7 pages long. This one is only 3. So hopefully a little bit more streamlined, some different information in here than what was there previously, but I'm going to go over with you all the lines that you want to pay special attention to because they're kind of make or break on the terms of this particular contract. Okay, so this is the exclusive buyer agency agreement paperwork for the state of North Carolina. There is an option for a non-exclusive buyer agency agreement. It's very, very rarely ever used. I may eventually one day do a video on that, but in the 8 years that I've been doing this, not a singular time have I ever signed that paperwork or seen it signed by someone else. So this, again, is the contract paperwork that you are using to hire a particular agent to operate on your behalf. And similar to the touring agreement that we reviewed last week, this is going to outline who the consumer is. So on this first line, a particular buyer and a particular brokerage firm. Again, all customers ultimately belong to the firm, so you're not writing this with a specific agent. And then services provided. Again, this is going to outline exactly where or what properties this agent is going to represent you through. So this can be as broad or as specific as you want it to be. Again, an entire state, a county, a particular MLS number, a handful of addresses, completely negotiable amongst consumer and agent, and ultimately whatever you're most comfortable with in signing. When I sign these, generally speaking, I write them for the entire county of Pitt County and for 6 months. That's just how I've always done it. And generally it works well for the consumer as well, unless there's, some sort of special situation regarding a particular customer. Buyer disclosures. This is where the buyer is going to disclose if they have or have not signed any sort of documentation with another agent or firm, whether it be a buyer agency agreement or a touring agreement. And if you have signed that, in signing this paperwork, you are agreeing to disclose that agent or firm's information with the agent you're currently working with. That may seem a little bit intimidating. This is ultimately to protect the consumer because agents on the back end want to confirm that you're not entering into a situation where the commission for a singular transaction is owed to 2 separate agents. We don't want that. Nobody would have a good time if it got found out that that was the case. Additionally, you're going to disclose whether you are or are not working with a relocation company, and if you have or have not received sample copies of the purchase contract and the professional services disclosure form. I typically don't send out sample copies just because it's a little redundant. All of this paperwork you're going to encounter at some point throughout the transaction, and I am relatively thorough in going over things with people, and so I just don't normally send out empty copies of paperwork we're eventually going to get to with the big sample watermark on it, which is what you would have to receive in order to check that you have received those items. The term of the agreement outlines how long you're going to be in a contract with this particular agent, and then the fee for service. So again, all of these fees are negotiable and something that you need to work out with your specific agent, whether or not you're paying them a non-refundable retainer up front, a percentage of the gross sales price, a flat fee, or some other specified amount that you work out amongst yourselves. The fee is due and payable. This is a good thing to pay attention to because this is something that sometimes is skipped over. The fee is due and payable and considered earned by the firm when the buyer enters into a written contract during the term of this agreement to buy real property as described in Section 1. The fee will be due and payable to firm when buyer, any authorized assignee or buyer, or party authorized by buyer in contract closes or defaults on the contract. So, technically speaking, if you are a purchaser in the state of North Carolina who goes under contract on a home, who doesn't execute the sale of that contract, if you terminate, default, for whatever reason, don't close, the buyer agency commission is legally due and payable. Now, don't freak out, because that does not mean that any reasonable agent who has a client that terminates a contract because of a reasonable reason is going to sue you for the commission. I've been doing this for 8 years. I've sold over 300 houses. Not a single time have I gone after the commission on the buyer side. But just understand that if you in the 11th hour get cold feet, because I have had a buyer the day before closing just say, never mind, I'm just changed my mind, I'm not going to buy this house. Technically, the commission is due and payable. Just pay attention to that, because you want to be 100% comfortable with the agent you're signing this paperwork with, that they're going to also be reasonable should that scenario present itself. Okay? Mutual termination required, essentially meaning that both parties have to agree to terminate this contract if for whatever reason that were to occur. And then the protection period is, this is going to be a specified number. Typically, I put 30 days in this line item. So if a customer or client of mine goes under contract on a property that would fall underneath the specified service area within 30 days of this contract expiring, then technically I, as the agent on that contract, would be entitled to that commission. So this is another line item that you want to pay special attention to. You understand as a buyer that all of the compensation is negotiable. There are no fixed fees or anything like that. You can negotiate the compensation with your agent, and that agent can then negotiate the compensation with the listing firm and or the seller. This paperwork also outlines dual agency and essentially gives you a definition of dual agency, which we talked a little bit about in the Working with Real Estate Agents video. And dual agency occurs when either the same individual agent represents both the buyer and the seller in a transaction, or agents within the same brokerage represent the buyer or the seller in the transaction. And so in this paperwork, you would have the opportunity to either opt in for that type of representation or opt out. You can specify that you only want exclusive representation. So if the firm is not allowed to operate as a dual agent, and if you are okay with dual agency, what kind of dual agency are you okay with? Are you okay with true dual agency, in which the same agent represents both buyer and seller? Or do you prefer designated dual agency, in which two agents within the same brokerage can represent each side? There's also verbiage in here that specifies there could be cameras or audio surveillance in any of the properties you're viewing. This other professional advice is legal jargon that essentially is a CYA for agents, saying that we can't ensure the professional advice of any other vendor that we may connect the buyer with. Inspection cost is a big one. In the state of North Carolina, buyers are responsible for any of the costs associated with any inspections that are performed throughout the escrow period. So your general home, HVAC, pest, if you have a pool that you want inspected, if you want a radon inspection, septic, all of those things and the costs associated with those services provided are the responsibility of the client, of the buyer. When you go under contract or even make an offer, the terms of your offer or contract are confidential and cannot be disclosed to anyone other than the listing broker, the attorney's office, and the homeowner. And the remainder of this agreement is just typical legal jargon. There is a line item in here for additional terms. If there was anything specific that you wanted to address within the parameters of this contract, it would be done here. And then at the bottom here, you have line items for everyone's signature and information. Again, the firm name, information, license number, your agent's name, information, license number. This is a really important document. Again, this is probably the most important document short of the contract itself that you're going to sign, because in making the decision to hire an agent to represent you through the transaction, because in making the decision to hire a specific agent, you now create a scenario where there are certain legal obligations of you as a consumer. And so you just want to make sure that you are confident in your understanding of this paperwork and that the agent that you're working with is somebody that you trust. Thanks so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or suggestions on other content I can do in the future, drop it in the comments below. Thanks.